Clint Eastwood walked through the doors of NBC Studios uninvited. What happened next stunned every single person in that building and revealed the truth about why Hollywood's biggest movie star and America's most powerful talk show host had avoided each other for 15 years. March 1974. NBC Studios, Burbank, California. Studio 1, The Tonight Show set. It was 8:32 p.m. on a Tuesday night. Johnny Carson was live, mid-monologue, performing for 300 people in the audience and 32 million viewers watching at home. The Tonight Show wasn't just a talk show. It was an institution, and Johnny Carson ran it like a fortress. Every guest was pre-approved. Every joke was timed to the second. Every surprise was planned. When Johnny said no walk-ons, there were no walk-ons. Period. The security guards at NBC knew it. The producers knew it. Every celebrity in Hollywood knew it. You didn't just show up at Johnny Carson's show. You got invited. Or you didn't come at all. Then Clint Eastwood walked through the stage door. No booking, no invitation, no warning. Just Clint, 43 years old, the biggest box office star in America, fresh off Magnum Force and High Plains Drifter, walking onto Johnny Carson's set like he owned the building. The stage manager saw him first, rushed toward him. "Mr. Eastwood, you're not on the guest list tonight, we can't." Clint kept walking. Didn't stop. Didn't even look at him. Just that cold, dirty, hairy stare and kept moving forward. The crew froze. Cameras hesitated. 70 people backstage held their breath because everyone in that studio knew one thing. Johnny Carson and Clint Eastwood had history. Bad history. Johnny had mocked Clint's acting on national television for years. Called him the man who squints for a living. Made jokes about his whisper voice. And Clint? He'd never once sat in that guest chair. Not once in 15 years of being a movie star. He'd turned down every invitation, ignored every request, refused every attempt Johnny's producers made to book him. Now he was walking across that soundstage, heading straight for Johnny's desk, uninvited, unannounced, on live television. Johnny was mid-joke about Watergate. He saw movement in his peripheral vision, turned his head, saw Clint Eastwood walking toward him. His smile froze. His joke stopped halfway through. For maybe the first time in 12 years of hosting, Johnny Carson didn't know what to say. What happened in the next 90 seconds became the most legendary unscripted moment in television history. And it changed both men forever. If you're already hooked, hit that subscribe button right now, because what Clint said when he reached that desk is going to blow your mind. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching this from. Let's see how far this story reaches. Here's what you need to understand about Johnny Carson and Clint Eastwood in 1974. They represented two completely different kinds of fame. Two completely different ideas of what it meant to be a star. Two completely different generations of American entertainment. Johnny Carson was the king of late night. Since October 1962, he'd been the host of The Tonight Show. By 1974, that was 12 years. Over 3,000 episodes. He wasn't just famous. He was American television. 32 million people watched him every single night. His approval could launch a career. One appearance on his show, one good interview, and you were a star. Joan Rivers owed her career to Johnny. So did David Letterman. So did Jay Leno. So did dozens of comedians, actors, musicians who got their big break sitting on that couch next to his desk. But Johnny's power went both ways. If he didn't like you, if you disrespected his show, if you broke his rules, you were done. Finished. He could end careers with one cold shoulder. And Johnny Carson had rules. The biggest rule? No surprises. Everything on his show was controlled, timed, rehearsed. He was Midwestern, charming, quick-witted. He made everyone feel comfortable. But he was also in complete control every second he was on that set. Chaos wasn't allowed. Unpredictability wasn't allowed. You played by Johnny's rules or you didn't play at all. Then there was Clint Eastwood, the man who refused to play anyone's game. By 1974, Clint was the biggest box office draw in the world. Dirty Harry, High Plains Drifter, The Man with No Name trilogy. He'd made over $400 million at the box office, and he'd never sat in Johnny Carson's guest chair. Not once. Not because Johnny didn't want him. Johnny's producers had been trying to book Clint for over a decade. They sent invitations through agents. They sent personal requests. Johnny himself called Clint's people multiple times. The answer was always the same. No. No explanation. No excuse. Just no. Clint didn't do press. He didn't do publicity tours. He didn't do talk shows. He let his movies speak for themselves. The strong, silent type on screen and off screen. He didn't need Johnny Carson. He didn't need anyone. And Johnny? Johnny didn't like being rejected. So he started making jokes. 1971, during his monologue, Johnny said, "Clint Eastwood's acting range goes from angry whisper to angrier whisper." The audience laughed. Hollywood laughed. 1972, another joke. "I saw Clint's new movie. He squints, he shoots, he leaves. That's not acting, that's blinking with a gun." More laughs. 1973, Johnny did an impression of Clint. Squinted his eyes, lowered his voice, said, "Go ahead, make my day," in a harsh whisper. The audience roared. Clint never responded, never fired back, never defended himself, just kept making movies, which made it even more shocking when he walked onto Johnny's set in March 1974. Because when Clint Eastwood finally decided to face Johnny Carson, he didn't do it quietly. He did it in front of 32 million people. Smash that subscribe button right now, because what happens when Clint reaches Johnny's desk will leave you speechless. Clint walked across that soundstage at 8:33 p.m. Black turtleneck, gray sport coat, face like stone. No expression. Just that Eastwood intensity that could stop a man's heart from 50 feet away. The cameras scrambled to find him. The director in the booth screamed into his headset, "Camera 2, get on him. Who is that? Wait, is that Clint Eastwood? What is he doing here? Is this planned? Somebody tell me if this is planned." It wasn't planned. Nobody knew. Not the producers. Not Ed McMahon in his chair. Not Doc Severinsen and the band. Nobody. Johnny was flying blind, and Johnny Carson hated being blind on his own show. The audience saw Clint walking. A few people clapped. Most just stared. This wasn't normal. Johnny always introduced his guests. Johnny always set the stage. But Johnny wasn't saying anything. He was just standing there, frozen mid-joke, watching Clint Eastwood walk toward his desk. Ed looked at Johnny, looked at Clint, looked back at Johnny. His famous booming laugh was gone. The room was silent. You could hear cameras shifting. You could hear seats creak. You could hear Johnny breathing through his microphone. Clint reached the desk. Stopped. He was 6'4". Johnny was 5'10". Even with the desk between them, Clint towered over him. Two giants of American entertainment, face to face, live, unscripted, on national television. The most watched talk show in America had just become the most watched stare down in America. 3 seconds of silence. On television, 3 seconds feels like 3 hours. 32 million people watching. 300 in the studio holding their breath. Nobody knew if this was a bit. Nobody knew if this was a fight. Nobody knew anything. Johnny broke the silence first. That was what made Johnny great. Even blindsided, even clueless, he never lost timing. He raised one eyebrow. A small smile formed. He turned to the audience. "Clint Eastwood, ladies and gentlemen." The audience erupted. They didn't know why, but they knew it was big. Johnny turned back to Clint. His voice dropped. No longer performing, just talking. "This is a surprise." Clint's response came in that signature Eastwood whisper. Quiet, controlled, dangerous. "I know." Pause. "That's why I'm here." Johnny's brain was racing. Is this hostile? Friendly? A joke? He kept the smile, but his voice stayed careful. "We don't usually do walk-ons, Clint." Clint stepped closer to the desk. "I've been watching your show for 15 years, Johnny." A longer pause. "You've been making jokes about me for about 10 of them." The audience gasped. Nervous laughs, mostly silence. "I figured it was time we finally met." Johnny's face went through 5 emotions at once: surprise, concern, amusement, respect, and something nobody expected: relief. Then Johnny Carson did something he rarely did on television. He broke. Not his polished TV chuckle, his real laugh. The deep, from-the-gut one that only came out when something truly surprised him. He threw his head back, slapped his desk, and the whole studio exhaled. The tension shattered like glass. Johnny looked at Clint, looked at the audience. Back to Clint. "You know what, Clint? You're absolutely right." He turned to the audience, still laughing. "Ladies and gentlemen, this man has never been on this show. Not once. Not because I didn't want him here, but because every time we asked, he said no." Back to Clint. "So I figured if he won't talk to me, I might as well get some material out of it." The audience laughed, not mocking now, but relieved. This wasn't a fight. It was something else. Johnny continued. "I've been making fun of your whisper for years." He did the impression again. "Go ahead, make my day." The audience roared. But this time, Clint smiled. Just barely. Enough for Johnny to catch it. "And now you're here live, and I have no idea what you're about to say. You finally got Johnny Carson with no script." Clint let the moment breathe. Then, "I didn't avoid your show because I don't like you, Johnny." He gestured to the cameras, the desk, the lights. "I avoided it because I'm terrible at this." Johnny blinked. "Terrible at what?" "This. Small talk. Being charming on command." Vulnerability crept into his voice. "You make it look easy. The jokes, the timing, making people feel comfortable. I can't do that. I can ride a horse off a cliff. I can stare down villains. But sitting in that chair trying to be interesting for 8 minutes while 32 million people watch? That terrifies me more than any stunt I've ever done." Silence. Clint Eastwood, the toughest man in movies, admitting fear on live television. Johnny leaned forward. "You're serious. Dead serious." Then, "I'm the strong, silent type because I'm actually just bad at small talk." The audience laughed, warm, understanding. "So when you joked about my acting, I was relieved. It gave me an excuse not to come. But then I realized something." He looked at Johnny. "I was being a coward, and I don't like being a coward." Johnny's smile softened. He processed what Clint just handed him. This wasn't the caricature. This was a person. "You know the irony, Clint?" Johnny said. "I'm terrified of what you do." The audience stirred. Johnny continued. "I can talk to anyone for 8 minutes. Presidents, criminals, actors, doesn't matter. But you can stand on a screen completely silent for 8 minutes and hold 50 million people in your hand. That's a power I'll never have." "You make people feel without saying a word," Johnny said. "I make them laugh with too many words. Maybe we've been scared of each other's talent this whole time." The studio was dead silent now. No comedy, no performance, just honesty. Johnny looked at the couch. "So here's what we're going to do. You walked onto my set uninvited. I'm inviting you now. Sit down. Live. No pre-interview, no planned stories, no safety net. Just 2 men scared of what the other does best. What do you say?" 300 people held their breath. Ed McMahon leaned forward. The cameras zoomed tight. America waited. Clint smiled. "Only if you promise not to ask about my process." Johnny grinned. "Deal." They shook hands. The audience erupted. Johnny turned to the crew. "Cancel the next 2 guests. Mr. Eastwood and I are going to talk." For the next 42 minutes, America watched something they had never seen. Clint Eastwood, sitting on Johnny Carson's couch, talking. Really talking. The next morning, newspapers across America ran the same story. Eastwood crashes Carson. The strong, silent type talks for 42 minutes. Carson's best interview was the one he didn't plan. Variety added, "Unscripted Eastwood delivers highest Tonight Show ratings in 5 years." The numbers agreed. That episode pulled 41 million viewers, the highest Tonight Show rating since 1969. Inside NBC, executives were stunned. Who approved this? Nobody. That was the point. It was real, and America could tell. Within 48 hours, NBC repackaged the interview as a primetime special. The night Clint crashed Carson aired 2 weeks later and pulled another 38 million viewers. It became the most replayed Tonight Show episode in history. But the real change wasn't in ratings. It was in the two men. Johnny Carson stopped making jokes about Clint Eastwood. Completely. For the next 18 years, until Johnny retired in 1992, he never mocked Clint again. When interviewers asked about the old whisper impressions, Johnny would smile and say, "I was wrong. The man's a genius. He just works in silence instead of volume." 6 months after that night, Johnny called Clint himself. "Clint, it's Johnny. I'm asking if you'll come back on the show, as a planned guest this time." Clint said yes. Between 1974 and 1992, Clint appeared on The Tonight Show 7 more times. Every appearance became the highest-rated episode of that season. And everyone was unscripted. Johnny never did pre-interviews with Clint. They just talked, like two men who finally understood each other. In 1984, Johnny gave a speech at the American Film Institute honoring Clint's career. "This man taught me something I thought I already knew. Silence is power." In 1974, Clint walked onto my set uninvited and gave me the best night of my career. Not for promotion, not for publicity, but because he forced me to be real. Clint rarely gave speeches. He hated them. But in 1989, honoring Johnny's 27 years on television, Clint said, "Johnny Carson made it safe to be vulnerable on television. I walked onto his show with no plan. He could have destroyed me. Instead, he made me feel like a friend. That's the mark of a great man." The two men weren't best friends. They didn't vacation together. But there was a respect, the kind that forms when two people reveal their humanity in front of millions. On May 22, 1992, Johnny Carson hosted his final episode of The Tonight Show. Clint Eastwood was one of the handful of guests. Johnny smiled. "Remember when you showed up here uninvited?" Clint nodded. "Best decision I ever made. Best surprise I ever got," Johnny said. They shook hands as the audience stood and clapped for 3 full minutes. What Clint did after Johnny retired reveals the real depth of their friendship. Between 1992 and 2005, Johnny Carson lived in Malibu. He disappeared from public life almost completely. He gave maybe 3 interviews in 13 years. He didn't go to events. He didn't make appearances. He just lived quietly by the ocean with his wife, Alexis. Very few people visited him. Johnny had spent 30 years being public. Now he wanted to be private. But people close to Johnny said Clint visited him. Not for cameras, not for publicity. No one even knew about it until years later. Just 2 old men who'd once faced each other on live television, now sitting on a deck, drinking wine, watching the Pacific Ocean. Johnny's wife, Alexis, mentioned it once in an interview after Johnny died. She said, "Clint made Johnny laugh in a way very few people could. They'd sit outside for hours, just talking, or not talking. They were comfortable in silence together. That's rare." On January 23, 2005, Johnny Carson died. Emphysema. He was 79 years old. The memorial service was private, invitation only. Clint Eastwood was there. He spoke. No recording exists, but people who attended said Clint told the story of walking onto Johnny's set uninvited in 1974. And he ended by saying, "Johnny taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness. He welcomed me when he could have humiliated me. That's the mark of greatness. Not how you handle the scripted moments, but how you handle the moments that surprise you." What Johnny and Clint represented was bigger than television or movies. Johnny mastered talk, performance, control. Clint mastered silence, intensity, mystery. 2 opposite approaches to fame. 2 opposite styles of connecting with people. And somehow, on one unscripted night in 1974, they found common ground. That moment is still watched millions of times every year on YouTube. Not because it was planned, but because it was real. Here's what that uninvited moment really teaches us. Fear and respect often look the same from the outside. Clint avoided Johnny for 15 years, not out of arrogance, but fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of not being good at something. Fear of losing control. Johnny mocked Clint for 10 years, not out of hate, but out of rejection. When someone won't give you their time, you protect yourself with jokes. Both men were scared of what the other represented. Johnny was terrified of silence, intensity, and not being able to charm his way through. Clint was terrified of small talk, performance, and being vulnerable in front of millions. It took one uninvited walk across a soundstage to break through all of that. Not a letter, not a phone call, not a scheduled meeting, a direct, live, face-to-face moment. Sometimes the people we avoid are the ones we most need to confront. Because on the other side of fear is understanding, and on the other side of understanding is respect. Clint didn't send a message through an agent. He showed up, in person, on live television, with no plan. That's real courage, not movie courage. Life courage. Clint Eastwood showed up uninvited. Johnny Carson's reaction stunned the studio. Two legends who avoided each other for 15 years became friends in 42 minutes. And American television got one of its most honest moments ever. Not because it was scripted, but because it was real. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that facing fear is worth it. Drop a comment below. Have you ever confronted someone you were avoiding? And tell me where in the world you're watching from. More untold stories are coming. Sometimes the best moments in life are the ones you never planned.